Welcome to the Calder Farmstead, your place for news, analysis, and shenanigans from the American Hockey League.
Face off one by the Condors. Jones top. Another point fence into the slot. A shot is gone! Josh Perry in double.
Left point long drive. Save Kinetic. What a stop by Matisse with the left pad. Oh, there was a scramble in front of the net. Denied was Matt Schicker by a miraculous piece of net binding by Matisse Kinetic.
Zielander from the red line sends it in. Hofer in the net. He stops it. Hofer looking. Hofer firing toward the empty net. He scores! Are you kidding me? Joel Hofer, a goalie goal in the Calder Cup playoffs.
And now, with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out. Right side with Fair. Brooks Light cutting to the net. Fair and let's go! He scored! He scored! It's over!
Hello, hello, hello from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan.
And Chicago, Illinois.
Welcome to the Calder Farmstead Podcast, episode number 142 for Thursday, June 8th, 2023. If you were hoping for a podcast featuring tips on keeping pests away from crops, we're not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast. My name is Sean O'Brien from StatsTrack and the AHL's only league-wide analytics guy.
And I'm Sarah Avampato from Full Press Hockey and SB Nation's Canes Country.
And as always, we thank you for tuning in with us. And if you're new to hearing Sarah and I talk about hockey, we're going to touch on some league-wide news, recap the conference finals, then preview the Calder Cup finals. We both watch a lot of AHL games and going to talk about what we see when we watch the film, as well as use some advanced stats to help us break it down. If that's new to you, you might want to head over to our podcast feed or YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to us from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to be talking about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're new to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries or Royal Road, go check that out. So you better be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes. And let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes believing Miami was going to have to plan not one, but 2 championship parades. You'll never get that time back. So next time, why not spend a little more time with us talking hockey? Sarah, we've managed to at least get this episode down to a reasonable amount. So let's finally get to some league-wide news that we've been kind of just putting on the shelf as those coaches aren't going to get any more hired at this point. Let's go, I think, in chronological order here and start with the Gulls hiring Matt McIlvaine. San Diego making the big announcement that they are indeed poaching the Ice HL head coach Matt McIlvaine. This was first rumored by Elliot Friedman for what feels like forever ago. But as usual, he was right on the money. Sarah, what are your thoughts on Matt McIlvaine, San Diego Gulls head coach?
This is one that, we always talk about how we want hockey to stop, hiring the same circle of 4 guys over and over and over again. And so I liked this one because he's someone who was kind of off the board, who was not a coach that, I think is on the radar of most people. Most people don't pay attention, no offense to the Ice HL, but no one does over here at least. So I like it because it's different. I like that they took a chance and they didn't just bring back some guy who we've all heard of before. How it's going to work out, who knows? But the Ducks are kind of in a place where they can afford to tinker with what's going on up and down the organization. So I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, my initial thoughts weren't that high, but that's because I stupidly looked at his resume on Hockey DB and not Elite Prospects. Hockey DB doesn't have the Ice HL in Austria, which usually is not a big deal, but it mattered here is because that's where most of his coaching success has come. What he's done there is impressive. He's an out-of-the-box hire, as you mentioned. He's young, said good things at the press conference. So for someone who's a bit of an unknown kind of coming into North America as a head coach, I'm at least tepidly excited about this one. My only knock against him is that he went to Ohio State, so I'm rooting against him in that sense. But I think this is very likely to be a good hire for San Diego. And it's always important to try and find the good up-and-comers that you can, stash in your AHL team for a couple years. Guys like, I don't know, Spencer Carberry or Mitch Love, guys who are clearly on their way up and you can manage to get in early instead of like having to, scrap to try and maybe get an interview with them later. That's usually the goal, and I feel like that's at least where this feels like it's trending. It might not work out, every once in a while. Instead of a Spencer Carberry, you get someone like, Ontario Reign coach before Marco Sturm.
John Wroblewski, who, I don't know if he didn't work out, but clearly did not fit the long-term, him and Ontario couldn't figure out a way to make that sustain. But I think this is has all of the earmarks of a good hire without me being someone who's very familiar with his body of work. Not a lot of video to review from the Ice HL over here. Okay.
Next up, the Sens removed the interim tag from David Bell. Not a big surprise here for me. There's no ownership in place, and rather than doing a big exhaustive search for a head coach, the one that did a pretty good job as an interim down the stretch that the players seem to like, that's a hard one to kind of talk yourself out of as an organization, especially, again, as their ownership is in flux. So, Sarah, your thoughts from Belleville hiring David Bell here?
Yeah, this one, no surprise. I think that had they hired anyone else, it would have been kind of weird. Like you said, he did a decent job as they were, closing up the season. Belleville's a team that has struggled, and what he did with a roster that I think at one point went through like 40 different goalies, was good. So I think it gives him a chance to see what he can do under a full season. I doubt that they have made a very long commitment to him, particularly with how much things are changing, with the ownership and everything. So, this isn't like the fun, exciting hire, but they did the right thing.
I will say I'm setting myself up for disappointment here, though. The Belleville Senators hired David Bell as their head coach. That is a treasure trove of cheesy puns and hashtags and merch and content at the B-Sens front office that has now at their disposal. And I'm 99% sure they will use none of it. This is a front office that only got more than 3,000 tickets sold to a game this season 7 times, and 5 of those 7 were against Toronto or Laval, which clearly tells you what fan base they got sold to. So that aside, we will make fun David Belleville content. But this is definitely the expected move here. And I don't think he's an unreasonable hire. He's got 2 seasons of head coaching experience, which isn't a lot, but he's also been an assistant coach for 16 seasons, 9 of which are in the AHL. Still a fair amount of unknown of how he'll be as a head coach, but he certainly meets the qualification bar, which not every team does with their head coach, San Jose. But the big question here, I think, is going to be if he can sustain some of that new coach bump that he got late in the season, if he can keep kind of the connection he managed to forge with that roster and those players going forward. It's kind of easy when you're in the moment, but now that there's an off season between you and, some distance, some new guys coming in, some old guys leaving, that sort of thing, keeping that momentum might be difficult. We'll see how he does. I think he should at least be able to tread water in an organization that typically does not give a lot of resources to its AHL club, quite apparently. All right, last kind of coaching hire for us to review. Iowa hires Brett McLean. Sarah, I'll kick it over to you once again. What did you think about this hire?
This was one where I definitely had to do a who whenever I saw the hiring. My bad, not familiar with the assistant coaches of the Minnesota Wild. But, we've seen this before. We've seen teams do this to kind of like try to keep a guy in the family. You're sending down a guy who is familiar with the systems, who knows what it takes at the NHL level. I think it would have been interesting to see Iowa do something more cool. I don't know. Like, Iowa has just been the Iowa Wild for so long. It's been the Tim Army coach team. You know what you're going to expect from the Wild. It would have been nice to see them do something a little more out of the box on this one. But they played it safe. They brought in a guy who was already a known quantity to them, who already probably knows a lot of these players from the time they've spent in the NHL. But I just kind of wish this would have been a great time for the Iowa Wild to kind of remake their whole deal. And I don't know that that's going to happen with him.
I agree. I feel like this would have been a good Matt McIlvaine kind of hiring spot for them, where they had time to kind of go a little bit more off board and a little more hire an up and coming developer type. I don't think Brett McLean's a bad hire, though. An interesting one, though. First time head coach, good bit of experience as an assistant at the AHL and NHL level in the Minnesota organization. He's been a coach behind the bench in Iowa before, so he has at least not necessarily some familiarity with the players, because a couple seasons ago I don't think there's anyone that carries over, but at least some familiarity with the organization in Iowa, the building, kind of coaching in the AHL, which I think matters. It's also another, mark in the recent trend of NHL assistant coaches becoming AHL head coaches. The Kings, Flyers, and technically the Coyotes did this with their AHL organizations in recent history. The success of those moves is, we'll say, mixed, to say the least. But, I think Brett McLean's young. He's enthusiastic. He certainly gave off energy. The initial vibes here for me seem that this certainly doesn't seem like a bad hire. I think it's probably going to work out fine. But McLean is not a known entity as a head coach, and while he's experienced as an assistant, it's not an overwhelming amount. I think him being a first-time head coach here limits how good of a hire this one is for me. You want to see a guy who's at least ran a bench before at a professional level, but I'm kind of in the wait-and-see category here. But I think anytime you don't botch the hire by going for nepotism or an empty resume or both, you're probably at least somewhere on the targets, somewhere on the dartboard, if not maybe at a bullseye. But I think that's in at least a good space. I think being mixed or not being overtly negative is usually a good sign from us. Let's move on to the last piece of business for league-wide news that we have here. One that just I saw and was confused by, and as I dug deeper, did not get less confused, but more just, but why?
Speaking of overly negative.
Inaugural all prospects team, and it is a thing. In fact, let's see if I can pull up the graphic here. All right, yeah, this is your man here, the all prospects, top prospects team for the AHL. Tyson Forrester, Yuri Kulich, Lucas Reichel, David Juracek, Simon Nemec, and Jesper Wallstedt. This is pretty much all the AHL put out. The tweet is basically just all about the prospects. They're announcing the team. They tagged the team that they belong to, and that's it. That is all we got with this. Apparently, there was an announcement by the league that they sent out to beat writers and teams that gave a little bit more explanation. But the team was, quote, according to that email that we managed to obtain, the team was, quote, selected by the league's hockey operations department in conjunction with team general managers. Skaters must have been 22 years old or younger on the first day of the regular season, must have played at least 36 regular season games in the AHL and no more than 30 regular season games in the National Hockey League. Goaltenders had to be 23 on opening nights, had to play at least 25 AHL games, no more than 20 NHL games. Those are kind of arbitrary lines to draw for me. None of them are unreasonable. I would have gone 23 for skaters and 24 for goalies, but that's picking nits here. The selections, though, here show that this process, like the AHL's other awards, is just largely a joke. Dustin Wolf, the league's reigning MVP, the first ever back-to-back Bastion Award winner, the Bastion Award for outstanding goaltender in the AHL. Somehow, he qualifies for this award. He is 22 years old, played way more than 25 games, played one NHL game. League MVP, best goaltender. Somehow was not the best prospect goaltender by your own criteria. okay. Joel Hofer also qualified. So did Yaroslav Askarov, Justus Anunin, Lucas Dostal, Vadim Zurenko, and Caden Primo, just to name a few. All of them had better seasons than Jesper Wallstedt. David Jurasek also made it. And as I tweeted out, he had four primary points at 5-on-5. Thomas Harley had 18. Isaac Phillips had 15. Riker Evans had 14. What are we doing here? Like, I don't understand why the AHL decided that they needed to announce this like way after all of their other award things and first all-star teams and all rookie teams and all of that. Like, why? This is just, Sarah, your thoughts.
Also, why? I hate awards that have like no clear actual criteria, so like this provides criteria for like eligibility in terms of how many games you had to have played, whatever. But you could ask 10 different hockey people what you mean by top prospect, and you're going to get 10 different answers. Is your top prospect the guy who's going to have like the most longevity in an NHL career? Is it the guy who's the most elite player? Like, there is no working definition for what top prospect is, at least in like what we've seen. This is so weird. Yeah, like they just released it. Also, like, who are the, like, I feel like we always have the question of who exactly are these like beat writers that the AHL is reaching out to? Because as one, I sure don't get reached out to. So, it's just, why did they do this? Were they bored? Did they not have enough going on with like the Calder Cup final?
Yeah.
Did they forget to post this like a month ago?
I mean, and this one's selected by the league's hockey operations department. So that's like Scott Housen, Dave Andrews, Haley Moore, Caruso, and Stephen Thompson. Like, that's the hockey ops side of it. Everyone else is like marketing, business, communications, whatever. So like they shouldn't be in on those conversations. No offense to those people. Like, and I mean, those are talented people at what they do. Is defining prospects and how good that prospect is one of those talents? I would argue probably not. Not to mention too, like, general managers in the AHL need to be able to evaluate talent, but like they evaluate talent right now, not, I think in 3 years this guy is going to be a projectable NHL player. Like, I'm sure mentally they probably do that, but like that's not a big part of their job. So consulting them, not great. They should have consulted like NHL pro scouts. That would have been, that's their job, is to scout like players going forward. That would have been a smarter play here. But again, why? So many questions as to why you put this unforced error out. Not to mention too, it's like, I know you heard me, league, about transparency. I know you did. Why did you think that doing this in the least transparent way possible was a good move? Like, I just don't know. Yeah. All right, Sarah, are you ready to talk about the conference finals?
I am. Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to recap the conference finals here. As always, we will start east to west. Let's talk about the Hershey Bears and Rochester Americans and start with what happened here. Rochester came out guns blazing and dominated game one with speed and a north-south play through the neutral zone. And then Hershey changed a lot after game one. They completely redefined their forecheck into kind of a hybrid look that would change kind of depending on situation to a more passive 1-2-2, occasionally running what looked like a 2-3 or like a weird hybrid 2-1-2 to a 1-1-3 at times, which is something you just don't see a lot of at the AHL level. But their goal was basically to make sure that they outnumbered the Amerks on the TV screen at all times through the neutral zone, making sure they always had 3 and 4 guys back to kind of make sure that the Amerks didn't beat them with north-south rushes and, having the ability to create odd man rushes, hit trailers, that kind of thing. They wanted to make sure they had bodies back on defense. They gave up zone entries and they didn't stand up on the blue line to minimize getting burned by speed to the outside, but they kept play to the outside. They had back checkers and lanes for trailers. They were able to make sure that Rochester could gain the zone but not do anything with it, which is a very specific strategy and not what I would necessarily recommend, but one that they executed very well. Hershey also changed their O-zone play. They had that third forward in the offensive zone sticking around the tops of the circles a lot more often and making sure that he was ready and in position to win, possession change to get back and play in the neutral zone. That was a safety valve for them to prevent odd man rushes. Then with 3 guys back, Rochester basically needs to do a 4-on-3 odd man rush, and that's not a thing. This all wasn't really in place effectively in time for game number 2, but it didn't totally matter as Hunter Shepard straight up thieved game 2 from the Amerks. The Amerks played a better game. They had got the best of the scoring chances, but goaltending is voodoo, and Hunter Shepard stood tall. Game 3 saw Hershey get out to an early lead as Logan Day blasted a Royal Road one-timer past Malcolm Subban midway through the first. Sam Annis gave them a 2-0 lead on their first shot on goal in the second period when Rochester's penalty kill just tripped over itself and gave him like 10 feet of runway at the top of the circle. Like, I was hitting record knowing that was going in right away. Zach Metza managed to beat Shepard just 2 minutes and 21 seconds later, thanks to an unfortunate screen by Dylan McElrath of his own goalie. But McMichael outbattles Lawrence Pilet at the front of the net to tap in a Lujo pass to retake the 2-goal lead for Hershey. Hershey goes on to a defensive shell to win Game 3 4-2. Game 4 saw Linus Weisbach score 2 backdoor goals for the Amerks to take a 2-0 lead headed into the third period. And then the Bears staged a massive comeback that saw Lucas Johansson and Logan Day score almost identical goals just 2 minutes and 5 seconds apart. Both were off the cycle and saw defensemen activate weak side off the blue line into the slot, take a Royal Road pass, and get it into the net. Logan Day is a little more fluidly and smoothly than Lucas Johansson's, who kind of lost control of it and like poke checked it past Malcolm Subban, but all the goals count the same. Hershey survived, the empty net attack to win 4-2. Mason Morelli completed the comeback too with a garbage bin style goal off a rebound at the net front, scoring basically a Mason Morelli goal. Game number 5 saw Hunter Shepard and the defense in front of him have a bit of an off night. Shepard allowed 2 soft goals to Yuri Kulich and Michael Mersch. The defense lets a Royal Road pass go untouched to a wide open Lucas Rauchek at the back door. Amerks made the series 3-2. Game 6 was a Hershey Bears specialty. Low event, slow paced, grinded out style game. Both goalies played spectacularly, but Hunter Shepard was able to make just one more save than Subban as the Amerks goalie kicked a rebound on a rush chance from Beck Malenstein right to Shane Gersich, who made it 1-0. And that was all the Bears needed. A 1-0 win. Hershey wins the series 4-2. Sarah, we did a preview. We deep dived it. What did we get wrong here?
Well, Hershey didn't bring the atmosphere in this series, but Rochester sure did. Hershey sold out Game 5, and that was it. The other 2 games this series sold less than 80% of the building, and the arena was maybe 65% full. Like, that's not to say that it was a library in the Giant Center for those games, but it still didn't have the same appeal as, a packed house. Games 3 and 4 in Rochester had more than 95% of their seats sold, and the building was electric from the start. Again, that's not to say that the Giant Center didn't get loud at times, but it wasn't the same intensity that we've seen in places like Coachella Valley, Laval, Rochester, Colorado, Texas, Abbotsford. Those places have gone nuts for the playoffs, and Hershey just didn't quite reach that level. Now, hopefully they get it together for the Calder Cup Finals. We talk on this show about how Hershey is, a fan base that is very passionate about this team. It's the oldest team in the league. You're in the Calder Cup Finals. So I really hope that one of the things that we see in this next and last series is that arena really bringing it for their home team. So in terms of things that we got right in our assessment of this series, Hershey did do better in killing penalties. Now, some of that was the Amerks power play just becoming way crappier than it was in the previous round. They went from having a dynamic off-puck movement with high reloads of their forwards to a more static, predictable 1-3-1 format with minimal puck movement and almost no off puck movement. Just like boring. Surprise. Hershey also clogged up the neutral zone. They didn't really force dump and chases, but they did do the work to limit odd man rushes and scoring chances off the rush. Rochester also didn't win shifts in the bottom six. Warren, Olszewski, Rouse, Rosayan, Malone, and Kozak combined for 1 goal in the series. Just one. Malenstein, Sutter, Lapierre, Annis, and Protas combined for 4 goals. They also didn't bring the wood. We talked a lot about that one. They did the opposite of bringing the wood. Rochester wilted, really, in the face of the physicality brought by the Hershey Bears. And we also talked about Malcolm Subban as our X factor. He played well in the series, but he just wasn't able to elevate enough to steal more than 1 game. The comments about him getting NHL backup looks, though, that's something. He had a .903 save percentage in the regular season, a .916 in the playoffs this year. So yeah, he did play really well in 3 of those 6 games in Hershey. But if you think that is enough for an NHL team to be interested again in putting you in a backup spot on the roster, like I don't know what to tell you. Maybe a team that is tanking like Arizona or Philadelphia, but that's not the same thing as I have legitimate interest in this player as a legitimately good player. That's not that's not the deal in some of those games.
I saw that, and I think that was like one of the members of like the Sabres like usual media, and it's like, you clearly have not watched Malcolm Subban play much of this season.
Yes.
Because if you think there are NHL general managers be like, I saw him play 3 playoff games and that totally erases what he did in the regular season or in previous rounds. Nope. Like, but then, I mean, we see kind of takes like that all the time from people who just are like, oh, I'm from the Buffalo News, or, I'm from The Athletic. What is a Marley? We see that all the time. So that doesn't mean it's not worth our shame, because it is. But like, be a little bit better if you're going to fake cover this team for a playoff round. All right, Sarah, final thoughts on the series here. I will go first, and then I will kick it over to you. This series was not well officiated, especially game number 3. Like, I'm going to say this. Rochester fans have a right to be upset after game number 3. There is still no excuse for you to ever throw stuff on the ice that's not a hat for hat tricks or like an octopus for the Red Wings. Or, I feel like we get the vibe here. You throwing literal garbage on the ice, that's shameful. What I think is the funniest part about that whole debacle is that the first fans that threw stuff on the ice, the ref like goes over to the PA system and tells the PA announcer to like say the warning of like, if you throw more stuff on the ice, Rochester will be issued a penalty for this, which is literally in the AHL rulebook as the procedure for that happening. And then they did it again like a couple minutes later, and the refs missed the call for the penalty on Rochester for them doing it a second time. That will never not be funny to me. But like I thought games 4, 5, and 6 were at least passably officiated. Were there mistakes? Sure. Were they like egregious ones? I didn't think so. I will say I thought every penalty that was called that was able to be seen on camera, because some are, behind the play and it's like, I don't know what happened. We'll call that good. All the ones that I was able to see and like kind of rewind and catch, they all looked like penalties to me. Some were softer than others, but everything that was called was clearly at least, letter of the law, a penalty. But we also talked about like how playoff officiating was going to hurt the Amerks way back on episode number 135 before the playoffs started, April 14th. That's the date that we talked about how like the Amerks' chances to go deep in the playoffs, because their power play was such a big part of how they won games, that it was going to hurt them. So yeah, we saw this coming weeks ago and nailed that. So a victory lap for us. Still, like, it's inexcusable for the AHL to have officiating that was this blatantly poor. But it's not like it was limited to this series. I mean, look at the NHL right now in playoffs, where Matthew Tkachuk can literally get slashed, cross-checked, slashed in basically a 10-second span, but he shoots a plastic rat towards the Vegas bench, and that's a 10-minute misconduct. The AHL also has had plenty of bad officiating in this postseason and other series. Calgary Abbotsford was terrible. Providence Hartford wasn't very good. But that's playoff officiating. Like, yeah, I can understand you shouldn't let the refs officiate a playoff game different. But at least in their defense, players play playoff games different. So some things do have to shift, as you can't call the same game. Or, well, you can and you should, but it doesn't happen that way. Like, people would lose their minds if the penalties were 7-9 for power plays for the other team. But at the same point, I think that would tell players to knock it the hell off and they would adjust and we would get back to a good place. But that's just me. But yeah, the officiating needed to be better. Hopefully in the Calder Cup finals, we at least have, not to the point where there are fans throwing things on the ice because they're angry and are rightfully angry but wrong in throwing things on the ice. Let's carry on here. Sarah, do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up the Amerks season in this series?
When we talk about the officiating, I will always think about last season, Ryan Warsofsky, earning that fine from the league for complaining about the officiating. And, he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong to say what he did, to go to bat for his players like that. Obviously he knew what he was doing when he made those remarks. He like I said, he earned that fine. But the fact that this is perpetually a problem is frustrating. This is the biggest stage that a lot of these guys have seen, maybe ever, depending on where they are in their careers and how luck has shaken out for them. And to have series that have such frustrating issues with the officiating, it's just not a good look. And I don't know what it takes to fix that, but I really wish they would. Overall, though, I thought this series was entertaining. There was a lot of really good tension. These weren't blowout games. This wasn't like a 7-1 win. The 1-0 final. I love games like that. I love, because clock's ticking down and you're like, this could go sideways real fast because you just got one goal. I think that this series provided a lot of those moments of tension and on the edge of your seat kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, Hershey was victorious, but I don't think Rochester has anything to hang their heads about on this one.
No, I don't either. I will say the throngs of people who were like, how could you put Matt Savoy in? That ruined all our chemistry. He's a fourth line winger, or a third line winger in one of the other games. If you think one third line winger is ruining the entire team's chemistry, then you admit that team chemistry is so fragile that your goalie stepping on a sidewalk crack on the way out ruins it. The 11-7 they were running with Olaszewski and Metza or Warren as their de facto bottom line with a rotating center or whatever. Putting somebody else as a fourth line, that ruined your kit, but nobody complained. Right. It was just did Savoy look lost out there? Yeah, that's what teenagers in their first AHL experience look like basically every time. So Jack Quinn looked like that early on in his AHL career. I thought that was silly, but at least worth mentioning that that's not why you lost. You lost for many other reasons than a guy who played probably 12 minutes and no power play time. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the Western Conference Finals, Coachella Valley Firebirds and the Milwaukee Admirals. Sarah, tell me what happened.
All right, so in this series, Coachella Valley defeated Milwaukee in 6 games, and this is the first series in these playoffs that the Firebirds did not actually need the full length of the series to get the job done. So games 1 and 2 were both pretty solid wins by Coachella Valley at home. Game 1 was a 6-4 final score. The Firebirds opened scoring on a power play goal, so they kind of gave you false hope, right? That maybe the power play was going to be better. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Milwaukee had a really slow start in this game. They were outshot 11-5 in the first period. But they did score basically on the next shift after that Firebirds opening goal. The game was tied 2-2 after the first 2 periods, which maybe made this seem like it'd be a nice, normal, chill hockey game, nothing weird or anything. And then the Firebirds proceeded to score 4 straight goals through the middle of the third period. Oops. This game did feature a lot of goals in very close time proximity to each other. First period, there were goals 30 seconds apart. Second period, goals about 2 minutes apart. Third period, two of the goals the Firebirds scored came about 40 seconds apart. And then later on in the game, Coachella Valley and Milwaukee scored about 20 seconds apart. So again, we're seeing this scoring in bunches with this team. There were good responses from Milwaukee when they were scored on, but obviously that stretch in the third period killed them in this game. Game 2 was a 5-3 final score, which included 2 empty net goals from Coachella Valley and then 1 garbage time goal from Milwaukee in the final seconds of the game. Coachella Valley's first goal came off of a massively misplayed puck by Yaroslav Askarov. He went to play the puck and then kind of like lost his balance with it while he was in the crease with it, like didn't get his stick on it good, and basically just flopped and turned it over to Alexander True, who had like maybe the easiest goal of his career other than an empty netter. So that was bad. That was not a good look for Milwaukee and kind of started things out rough for them. They were having some success off the rush, but Joey Decord was just stopping everything that he saw. On the other side of the ice, Askarov struggled. That first goal was his first real big, like, oops moment where he did something that he wished he really massively hadn't done. But overall, he just didn't look as sharp as we're used to seeing him. Sure, he's not making the crazy plays that give people anxiety. He's not, like, charging someone out of the net, but he wasn't playing with the same confidence that we're used to seeing from him either. Game 3, the series shifts to Milwaukee, and things change. Milwaukee gets a 3-1 win. And given Askarov's struggles in net, the matter of who would be starting for Milwaukee was a big narrative going into this game, and they did indeed make the switch and go with Devin Cooley. Devin Cooley's fine, but if you're entrusting your playoff hopes and dreams to him, something has gone wrong, and something clearly did go wrong for the Admirals here. In this game, though, Milwaukee flipped the script from those first 2 games. They played with a lot more confidence, more aggression, and it paid off. They ultimately outshot Coachella Valley 37-29. Game 4 was a 5-2 Milwaukee win. Wasn't as dominant as a game statistically as Game 3 was, but they were able to take advantage of Coachella Valley's mistakes. Milwaukee went 2 for 3 on the power play here. More importantly, though, Coachella Valley went 0 for 5. That kind of shapes your game a little bit. Milwaukee also had 1 shorthanded goal that came just 17 seconds into the third period and 1 empty net goal. But special teams were really the story of Game 4. Game 5 was much closer than really any of the others that we've seen in this series. 2-1 final score in favor of the Firebirds. Both Firebirds goals came in the second. Milwaukee's only goal came in the first. And Coachella Valley really locked things down in the third period of this game. Shots were 6-6 total in the third period. Coachella Valley took 1 penalty in the third. Milwaukee got 2 shots total on that power play, which ended up being the last shots of the game. From 15 minutes and 37 seconds in the third period to the final horn, there were no shots by either team. So locked it down. Headed back to Coachella Valley for Game 5. Final score was 4-3. The Admirals did stick with Devin Cooley in net. Curious to see if they would go back to Askarov, if they, wanted to switch it up. But no, they stayed with Devin Cooley. I wouldn't say that Game 5 loss was on him. If your team only scores 1 goal, there's not much you can do about it. Coachella Valley scored twice in the first period, but that didn't feel insurmountable. That's a lead that you can come back from. What did feel insurmountable was the second period, where Milwaukee outshot Coachella Valley 14-3 and only got 1 puck past Joey Decord. I feel like if you put in a period like that, you leave it all out there on the ice and you still can't get more than 1 goal, it's just not your night. Milwaukee did make it interesting in the third. They scored early to make it a 1-goal game. Coachella Valley scored again with about 9 minutes left to bring things, and then Milwaukee scored again with about 9 minutes left to bring things within 1. Once again, Coachella Valley shut things down at the end of the game. Kiefer Sherwood was the one who scored for Milwaukee towards the end of the game. After that goal, Milwaukee only got 4 shots total. Coachella Valley had none. Their last shot of the game was at 9 minutes and 54 seconds in the third. That is over 10 minutes without a shot on goal for Coachella Valley, roughly about the same amount of time for Milwaukee. Coachella Valley focused solely on preserving that lead and getting that win. There was a late penalty from Billy Petman on the Firebirds, which gave the Admirals an opportunity. They only got 2 shots on that power play, resulting in a win for Coachella Valley and handshakes over at center ice. So what did we miss in this series? Well, Coachella Valley's power play absolutely did not find its way again. It just ultimately didn't matter. Against Calgary, the previous series, Coachella Valley was 3 for 18 on the power play. That was a 16.7% hit rate. This series, they went 2 for 21. That is a 9.5% success rate on the power play. That is real bad. The eventual game winner in Game 6 was actually a power play goal from Ty Cartier. It was their first power play goal in this series since 4 minutes and 14 seconds into Game 1. That is like 6 games basically of hockey without a power play goal. Incidentally, that other power play goal was also scored by Ty Cartier. What else did we miss? Well, Phil Tomasino did get it together. It just didn't matter for the Admirals. Before this series, Tomasino had 3 assists in 10 games for Milwaukee. In this series, he had 2 goals and 4 assists, where he led the team in points, was tied for second in assists. He had 15 shots on goal, making him third on the team, averaged 2.5 shots per game, which is much closer to his AHL career average of 2.7. He shot this series at 13.3%, much closer to his career average of 13.6, and better than his 2022-23 season average of 12.9%. So Phil Tomasino finally turned it back on. The rest of the team just did not help him out. So that's what we missed. What did we get right in this series?
So we said that Cole Schneider needed to return to the lineup, and he was in for a game, but didn't really make the return to the lineup that we were kind of talking about. We needed him to not make a cameo. We needed him to be the return of the king. We said that, the Admirals captain who led the team in goals in the regular season needed to be a regular back in the lineup. He only played 2 games in the series against Texas. Milwaukee does have a veteran problem on their roster where they each kind of have to have at least 2 of the 7 guys that qualify as veterans sit each game, but Schneider isn't the obvious or even reasonable choice to make sit. Only played 1 game in the series, Game 2, no shots on goal, -2. Yes, that's in the lineup, but spoiler, 1 game in a 6-game series is not enough. I'm going to call that a scorecard on we said he needed to be in. He wasn't in. They lost. The other one was that we got right was the Firebirds crashing the nets. They didn't look for the perfect shot. They used screens, deflections, tip-ins to score. Game 6, for example, Ty Cartier picks up a puck from behind the net, keeps his feet moving, then banks his shot off Devin Cooley and in. In a key to the series that dovetails with this one, Askarov very much did not stay inside the lines, losing both game 1 and 2 because of that definitely sank the Admiral ship. Devin Cooley played well in relief, but it very much felt like too little too late. Askarov is talented for sure, but there's work for him to do in the offseason. Firebirds also did not let Milwaukee build speed through the neutral zone. Coachella Valley put on a clinic in a trapping 1-2-2 forecheck at times. Game number 2 and games 5 and 6 especially saw them just clog the neutral zone like a Taco Bell toilet. They forced Milwaukee to play dump and chase for large portions of those games. And while the Ads can create offense off the cycle, the rush was their main weapon, and the Firebirds took it away in a manner that I think even Barry Trotz had to smile about at least, because I know that when he goes home at night, he dreams about shutting down rushing chances with 1-1-3 and 1-2-2 forechecks. The last thing that I will say we got right, our X factor for the series was momentum. We talked about how both teams were able to score in bunches and clap back when a goal was scored against them, answering goals with goals. Coachella Valley scored first in 5 of the 6 games. They also scored in bunches 3 times in the series. They scored multiple goals in a 5-minute span. They also clapped back when the Admirals scored. 3 times they answered Milwaukee's goal with a goal of their own in under 5 minutes of game time. That helped them shortcut Milwaukee's momentum and launch them into their own. It was definitely a factor in the series, especially early on. I mean, game 1 was just, I score, you score, I score, you score, I score in bunches. Oh, suddenly you can't anymore. I think that really kind of sealed momentum as the X factor for us, and that's definitely one we got right. Sarah, final thoughts on the series here.
So for me, one of the things that stood out in this series was I did not anticipate that goaltender switch happening for Milwaukee, or at least I didn't anticipate it happening in the way that it did. Going into this series, one of my biggest concerns was Askarov just getting too aggressive, mishandling the puck, playing the puck like a crazy person, doing the thing where he just charges out because he can. That happened for the one goal, but in general, he played within those lines, right? Like he played within the I haven't done something insanely stupid lines. But his struggles in this series, he got pulled. He didn't get to finish the series. The struggles seemed much more mundane to me. Issues with positioning, timing, reading plays, things that goaltenders normally struggle with that give you anxiety, but not to the level of like, why is he all the way out there at the hash marks? Like just a different issue. I wouldn't have been surprised to see a goalie switch if he had been up to those same sort of antics. It was more surprising to see that happen due to him just sort of faltering in general. I didn't expect that from him. I expected him to be a guy who would kind of continue to rise as the pressure rose, and that is really not what happened here. So good series. I think Milwaukee gave it all they had, but Coachella Valley just they said no.
I think for me, once Jordan Gross and Cole Schneider were out of the lineup, it felt like the best team won here. Personally, I start Devin Cooley in game number 2. I saw from Askarov in game 1. I'm like, nope. I thought he cost them that game, and I'm as we've talked about many, many times on the show, I have the lightest trigger pull on earth when it comes to swapping goaltenders in game, making changes in net. Like I am not someone who's like, oh, my fragile little goaltender psyche will be forever shattered because I pulled him because he let in 2 goals in the first period. Like I think the difference between goaltending in hockey and starting pitchers in baseball, where it's like you see starting pitchers get pulled after 2 innings, and at the post game press conference, they're like, "Yeah, I didn't have it today. He was right to pull me." Like you hear that over and over again, where it's like every single time you see goalies get pulled on a short leash, it's like, I don't know, is he gonna Patrick Waugh this up? And like I start Devin Cooley in game 2. I have the receipts in DMs to show that as well. Does that shift the series for Milwaukee? Probably not. Definitely not with Gross and Schneider out. But I think it gave them more of a fighting chance. Like, I agree that it wasn't all Askarov going out and doing wild things, but you cannot watch that first goal in game 2 and be like, that's my guy.
Yeah.
Especially, too, like, you put him in game 3 and he doesn't do well again. Then what? Game 4 is do or die. Like, do you put a cold goalie and Devin Cooley in the net for a season-ending game? Like, to me, when you're thinking about making the switch, you have to do it by game 3, because if you're 0-3, putting in a new goaltender at that point is, swapping deck chairs on the Titanic. Your time to do that is gone. I will say I'm also really disappointed that the Admirals couldn't do more to fill the building. Only one postseason game did UW Panther Arena have more than 51% of seats sold. And even then, like, having big patches in your lower bowl be empty and visible on camera for AHL TV the entire game is not a good look for your franchise. Like, the Brewers weren't even playing in Milwaukee for all 3 games they hosted in the conference finals. So what gives, people of Milwaukee? Why are you not coming out for fun? Do you not want to be slingshotted across 200 feet of ice into bowling pins? I find that very hard to believe. I want to do that. I would make a personal trip to Milwaukee to do that. That looks like a ton of fun. But I don't know. I was just really surprised to see, like, this isn't, a rural small town market with a big arena. Like, I mean, Utica only has 3,000 seats, and I know they get picked on a bunch. I think they sell out a bigger building. But, like, if this were a small town like Utica is or Binghamton is, where it's like, okay, maybe they can't fill a 9,000, 10,000 seat arena, period. Like, Milwaukee's a major metropolitan area. What are we doing, guys? Watching baseball? Baseball. No. All right, I think that's a good place to leave it. We're going to take a break here. After the break, we will preview the Calder Cup Finals. If you're just here for a recap, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe to get episodes in a timely fashion. Even if your team is eliminated, we have that award show thing coming up. You are going to want to see that. Your team, your favorite team, might even win an award. Also, make sure you check us out on social media. Links to our social media and more can be found at our Linktree page at linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. We're going to pay some bills, run some ads. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to the Calder Farmstead. If you are just joining us now, you skipped all the recap stuff. You're here to hear about the Calder Cup final. We've broken down everything that has gotten us to this place. And now we've got two teams left. We have the oldest team and the newest team in the AHL facing off. We've got the Coachella Valley Firebirds playing against the Hershey Bears. So we're going to take a look at the series. We're going to look at the teams, and we're going to make some guesses about what happens. This series kicks off Thursday, June 8th. That is today. 7 p.m. at Coachella Valley is game number 1. Game 2 is Saturday, June 10th, 7 p.m. at Coachella Valley. Game 3, Tuesday, June 13th, 7 p.m. at Hershey. So heading back across the country. June 15th is game 4, Thursday, 7 p.m. at Hershey. June 17th, game 5, Saturday, 7 p.m. at Hershey. And then head back to California. Game 6 is Monday, June 19th at 7 p.m. And game 7, if needed, Wednesday, June 21st, 7 p.m. Interestingly, no back-to-backs. Good job, AHL schedulers.
B+. You're playing Thursday, Saturday instead of Friday, Sunday.
Well,
so,
can't win them all.
Yeah, and the arena was available. The only there isn't anything interfering with any of these dates. I think there's the only thing is the 16th. There's something in Coachella Valley, like a concert of some sort. But you definitely could have played Friday, Sunday, but whatever. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, continue, Sarah.
So we're going to look at Coachella Valley. How did they get here? Their playoff journey to this point, they beat Tucson in 3 games in the first round, Colorado in 5 games in the second round, Calgary in 5 in the division finals, and then, as we just talked about, Milwaukee in 6 games in the Western Conference final. Their season record, they were 48-24. That was second in the AHL. Their net power play and rank, 17.8% in the regular season, 12th in the league. In the playoffs, 15.3%, 14th out of 23 playoff teams. Net penalty kill is 86.2% in the regular season, 6th in the league. And the playoffs, they are a very consistent 86.2%, 8th out of 23 playoff teams. So if the Coachella Valley Firebirds win this series, it is because they didn't let Hershey take an early lead. All season long, the Bears have been one of the best teams in the AHL at locking down leads. In the regular season, 1-4 after leading after 1 period, 16-1 when leading after 2 periods. They were 34-14 when scoring first. That was the 7th best win percentage in the AHL in the regular season. In the playoffs, they're 3-0 when leading after the first period and 6-0 when leading after 2. They're 6-1 when scoring first. Hershey is perfectly content winning games 1-0, 2-1, 2-0, so on and so forth. They did it twice against Rochester, including a 1-0 win in the series clinching game number 6. 3 of Hershey's last 5 wins in the playoffs have featured 4 or fewer total goals scored. If Coachella Valley wins the Calder Cup, one of the reasons will be that they didn't let Hershey take early leads and kept them chasing the game. If Coachella Valley wins, it's because, this should sound familiar, the power play gets its act together. It is bizarre to say that a team as talented as Coachella Valley has struggled so heavily on the man advantage. If you missed the recap, I'll say it again. They were 2 for 21 against Milwaukee. 2 for 21. I think that I could score more than 2 goals by accident with this lineup. There's no reason for this. Hershey is absolutely going to look to play an in-your-face physical game, even if that's not a big part of their game plan. You've got guys like McElrath, Malenstein, and company. They just can't help themselves. That is what they do. And while playoff officiating is 100% totally a real thing, some penalties are inevitably going to be called in this series. And when that happens, Coachella Valley needs to make Hershey pay. Hershey also runs a very passive penalty kill that surrenders time and space on the perimeter in order to clamp down in the high danger areas like the slot, net front, and across the Royal Road. Coachella Valley isn't going to catch them chasing the play or kind of floating around like they did with Milwaukee in Game 6. The Firebirds are going to need to focus on quick puck movement, dynamic off-puck shifts, and opening up lanes across the Royal Road to get the Bears penalty killers to move and to open up some space in the valuable real estate in the slot, net front, and Royal Road area. If they can do that, they can start planning the parade in Palm Desert. If they win, it's because they don't let Hershey up off the mat even. So far in Coachella Valley's initial playoff run, they have shown an ability to score in bunches, answer back, dominate games. They have also shown a propensity for letting teams up off the mat after they've knocked them down. They came off of a dominant win in game number 1 against Tucson, where the Coachella Valley Firebirds let the Roadrunners get up off the mat in game 2. They came out flat, gave up a 3-goal lead, and had to chase the game. That series could have ended in 2 games, and instead they let Tucson up. Next series, they came off of a dominant win in game 1 against Colorado. Coachella Valley let Colorado get up off the mat in game 2 and game 3. They could have won game 2 and gone home with a 2-0 advantage in a best-of-5 series. Instead, they had to dig deep, force a game 5 because they messed around and very nearly found out. Once again, off of a dominant win in game number 1 against Calgary, they let the Wranglers up off the mat. They had a chance to go back to Acrisure Arena with a 2-0 series lead, finish things nicely at home. Instead, they let the best team in the regular season up off the mat and had to battle a close series down to literally a season-deciding overtime. And again, they came off of a dominant win in game number 2 against Milwaukee, let the Admirals up off the mat in games 3 and 4, and had to go back to Coachella Valley to close out the series. Hershey is not a team to be trifled with. Todd Nelson has built a team culture with the Bears that is all about resolve and the desire to keep fighting. On their playoff t-shirts that the players have, there is an acronym spelling out Bears Calder Cup. It's got words like believe, sacrifice, heart, focus, energy. This isn't just like corporate buzzword, empty platitude nonsense. These are the core values held by the Hershey Bears in that locker room. Hunter Shepard's words to the team after the phone booth knife fight series win were, "It is kill or be killed, and we're Bears." If the Firebirds let this Bears team up off the mat as the series switches to the East Coast, there is a good chance they won't go back on it. So they need to close out the job with Hershey no matter what. That is the story for Coachella Valley. How did the Hershey Bears get here? What is their story?
The playoff journey of the Hershey Bears so far, they had a first-round bye. They beat Charlotte in 4 games in the second round. They swept Hartford in the phone booth knife fight division finals. Then they beat Rochester in 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Their season record, 44-28, 4th in the AHL. Their net power play and rank in the regular season, 15.4%, 21st in the AHL. In the playoffs, 21.6% net power play, 6th out of 23 playoff teams. Their net penalty kill and rank from the regular season, 83.1%, 18th in the AHL. In the playoffs, a little better, 85.7%, 8 out of 23 playoff teams. If they win, if the Hershey Bears win, it's because they got the top 6 off the side of a milk carton. Ethan Frank, Mike Vecchione, Henrik Borgstrom, Joe Snively, Garrett Pilon. That's the majority of the Bears' top 6, more or less. Some facsimile of that makes up 5 slots. Ethan Frank has 0 primary points in the conference finals. He has 1 primary point all playoffs. He had 39 in the regular season. Mike Vecchione, 0 primary points in the conference finals. Henrik Borgstrom, 1 primary point in the conference finals. He only played, I think, 4 games, so some salt there, or some, teaspoon of salt there. Joe Snively, 0 primary points in the conference finals. Garrett Pilon, 0 primary points in the conference finals. That is the majority of the Bears' top 2 lines that are not producing meaningful offense. Personally, I think Frank and Snively are trying to play through some semi-serious to possibly serious injury, and that's why they just don't look the same out there, because neither of them is passing the eye test in alarming ways, whether that's mishandling pucks and passes, not showing the same level of compete, or looking like a spectator away from the puck way too often. regardless of why 4 of the top 6 have been MIA recently, it needs to end. Coachella Valley is deep, fast, physical, and skilled. And without the top 6 clicking and putting pucks in the net, the Bears aren't going to be making a return trip to California. It's going to end in Hershey. If the Hershey Bears win the Calder Cup, it's because Hunter Shepard steals the show repeatedly. And just because this is an obvious one does not make it any less accurate. Hunter Shepard has been the Bears' clear-cut playoff MVP to this point, and I don't know it's all that close. Like, yes, Alexi Protas has played well, Sam Anis has played well, Logan Day has played very well, but it begins and ends with Hunter Shepard. He's going to need to continue to be stellar here, as the Firebirds have made goalies like Jonas Johansson, Yaroslav Askarov, and Dustin Wolf all look mortal on their rampage through the playoffs. For those keeping score at home, that's a goalie with a .920 save percentage in his last 3 full seasons in the AHL, a first-round pick and Nashville's goalie of the future, and the reigning MVP and first-ever back-to-back Bastion Award winner, but not top prospect team goaltender, in Dustin Wolf. A lot of that is because Coachella Valley doesn't just throw pucks to the net with some traffic and hope for good luck. They're looking to generate high-quality scoring chances and use shots from distance as a last resort or as an offensive zone reset, not a first resort and a first line of attack. They're dynamic in the offensive zone and have versatile forwards like Podorowski, Cartier, Frodean, True, McCormick, and Hayden who can attack in multiple ways successfully, whether that's as a playmaker, sniper, or garbage man at the net front. Yes, Hunter Shepard has been fantastic in the playoffs, but he also looked mortal at times against Rochester. If he has a performance like he did in Game 5 or in Game 1 against Coachella Valley, Bears are going to have to wait for another year to hang banner number 12. If the Hershey Bears win this series, it's because they ugly it up and make it boring. Coachella Valley's offense is deep, dynamic, and multifaceted. It's like a game of Clue. There are a ton of ways in which the Firebirds murder you with a big cast of suspects. Hershey needs to keep as many suspects and murder weapons under wraps as it can. Forechecking is one. Hershey made the adjustments to their forecheck in the offensive zone against Rochester to make sure they always had bodies back, ready to defend, so the Amerks couldn't fly through the neutral zone and create off the rush. Attacking off the rush is the Firebirds' equivalent of Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with the candlestick. It's not always the answer, but it's a classic. Finishing checks is another. Calgary took Coachella Valley to Game 5 overtime with a physical approach that saw them battle for every puck at every time and finish every check. They were one goal, one good luck bounce away from ending Coachella Valley's season. No one else has gotten that close, so implementing some of that game plan is going to be important. Regardless, Hershey needs to drag Coachella Valley down into the dungeon, into the phone booth that is so familiar to them, and hope that in an ugly, low event, grinded out, fight for every inch style series, that they will have the resolve to pull it out. Make no mistake about it here. Hershey is going to have to execute 4 games with little to no mistakes being made, because Tucson, Colorado, Calgary, and Milwaukee will all tell you, it only takes a couple slip-ups for the Firebirds to turn you into Mr. Body. Last but not least for our analysis of the Calder Cup Finals are X Factor. Our X Factor for this series is adjustments. These are 2 teams that not only have never played each other, they're 2 teams that haven't even been in the same time zone as each other before this week. Both sides have video coaches, full coaching staffs, practice schedules, and game plans for Game 1. But you cannot convince me that you can fully prepare a team for a high-stakes playoff game against an opponent they've only ever seen on a video screen. And yes, Hershey had the longer layoff and more time to prepare, but Coachella Valley 100% has Eddie Whitko in their locker room spilling all the Bears' secrets. Regardless of who wins Game 1, adjustments are going to be needed to be made as each side's abilities come more and more into focus, and the opponents go from being figures on a scouting report and clips on a screen to putting their shoulder into yours and slamming you into the boards. Both sides have shown the flexibility and savvy of their coaching staffs and the ability to process structural changes quickly by their players. As we mentioned in the recap, Hershey made big adjustments to their forecheck, offensive zone play after Game 1 against Rochester. Coachella Valley also made adjustments to its forecheck after Game 1 as they were getting burned and letting Milwaukee fly through the neutral zone. Both sides have impressive bench bosses who've been there before, and fun fact, this is one thing I was blown away to uncover that I haven't seen anyone else mention. This is not the first time Dan Bylsma and Todd Nelson have coached against each other in the Calder Cup finals. Both were assistant coaches in the 2008 Calder Cup finals. Bylsma was on the Wilkes-Barre Scranton bench, Nelson on the Chicago bench. And here we are, all these years later, again. Todd Nelson's been behind the bench for 2 Calder Cup champions, the previous one mentioned in the win for Chicago, and one with Grand Rapids in 2017 as the head coach. He also was an assistant coach on the Stars when they went to the Cup finals in 2020. He's been in these pressure situations before, and he knows what it takes to win and lose. Disco Dan Bylsma has been to the finals in both the AHL and NHL. Previously mentioned 08 finals where his Penguins lost to Nelson's Wolves, and in 2009, the very next year when Bylsma won the Stanley Cup with Pittsburgh. All that to be said, both head coaches have impressive resumes and winning pedigrees. This stage will not be too big for them, and the penchant they've already shown in these Calder Cup playoffs to make important adjustments and to get their team to execute will pay dividends in this series. But whoever does it better is going to massively tip the scales in their favor, and that is why it is our X factor. All right, Sarah, we are down to brass tacks here. I'm going to let you go first. Who you taking and why?
All right, so this is 2 teams with very different styles, which can make for a very interesting matchup. Does Hershey successfully slow this series down and grind out a win? The Firebirds just run rampant over the Hershey Bears. This should be a good goaltending matchup on both sides, with Hunter Shepard and Joey Daccord both proving they can play under the spotlight. Coachella Valley has the edge when it comes to scoring talent. The Firebirds lead the league in the playoffs with 67 goals, and they also lead the league in terms of games played, but if you do some math, they're averaging 3.5 goals per game in all situations. Hershey's averaging 3.1 goals per game. The narrative of the league's oldest team against its youngest team is going to make for some interesting storylines, but at the end of the day, Coachella Valley has climbed every mountain that they've faced. They've overcome doubts about goaltending. They've welcomed back players who they didn't expect to get back. At the end of the day, I think Coachella Valley wins this one, and I think Andrew Podorowski lifts his 3rd consecutive Calder Cup.
For me, in my heart, I want Hershey to win. One, because I've spent a lot of time in that area. I grew up going to Bears games as a kid, and even though it feels like that was a lifetime ago for me, in some cases it was. The Bears game I attended this year was the first one I'd been to in 15 years, give or take. And like everyone is gone from those memories. But still, it lingers. 2, because I'm going to be in the building in game number 4. And regardless, I'd like to see the Calder Cup awarded in person to the home team, regardless of what building I happen to be in that night. I am going to be in Giant Center for game 4 on Thursday. I'd like to see, the home team raise the Stanley Cup there. Or the Calder Cup there. If I were in Acrisure Arena for game 6 or 7, I would want the same thing. But it's hard to see how the Bears do it here. If they want to slow the game to a crawl and play stout defense and try and win games 2-1, that's fine. That's what Colorado did. If they want to be physical and finish checks with talent behind it that can finish opportunities and capitalize on mistakes via forechecking, that's fine. That's what Calgary did. If they want to dial up the tempo and play north-south hockey with a talent-full roster, that's fine. That's what Milwaukee did. Hershey's a good team, and they're here for a reason, but they've beaten a lot of 1- or 2-dimensional teams to get here. Charlotte had no goaltending. Hartford relied on a relentless physical forecheck. Rochester relied on speed through the neutral zone and officials that called penalties consistently. Milwaukee, Calgary, and Colorado all had strengths and an identity, but they could beat you in more than one way, especially Calgary. Like I said, I want in my heart Hershey to win. But this podcast is in the business of providing accurate AHL analysis, and that says the Coachella Valley Firebirds win the Calder Cup. See you in Game 4, Hershey Bears fans. And the model is in our side in a way that I think a lot of people will find surprising. Coachella Valley is a 64% favorite in the series. That is not, I checked that more than once. That is not an error by the model in terms of how it's calculated every series to this point. it really liked the West Coast. It was going to have Milwaukee be a big favorite, Calgary be a big favorite, probably Texas is a big favorite, although I didn't look at that off the top of my head. Coachella Valley is almost a 2-1 favorite in this series. So now that we've angered an entire, area code that I'm going to occupy on Thursday night, let's play Start Bench Ship. Sarah, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Give me a second while I get this up. All right. First up, most attractive head coaching vacancy in the AHL. There are more than these head coaching vacancies, but these seemed the most interesting for this bit here. So we have the Colorado Eagles, who Greg Cronin just got hired as the Anaheim Ducks head coach, the Henderson Silver Knights, who fired Manny Viveros, and the Toronto Marlies, who fired Greg Moore. Sarah, I will let you go first. Which of these is the most attractive job for head coaching candidates?
I am fascinated to see if we line up on these. I am starting Henderson. Yes, Vegas doesn't have a particularly deep prospect pipeline, but a lot has been said about how much Vegas as an organization is putting into making Henderson feel like a mini NHL team. They've put a lot of resources, a lot of money into that arena that they're in. I think they're doing everything they can to have a professional operation there. And I think that would be very attractive for someone looking to land in an AHL team. I am benching Colorado just because we have to. It's just sort of there. I am shipping Toronto because it feels like being a coach or in anything in related to hockey in Toronto just feels like a recipe to absolutely lose your mind and have everyone you ever meet hate your guts because you didn't win every single game. You could not pay me enough money in the world to go work for a Leafs thing because that market be wild, man.
You mean you don't want Steve Simmons to write ridiculous stories about you and, basically blatantly lie? I
think I'll skip that one.
Yeah. All right. We have a similar order here. I also am starting Henderson for a lot of the reasons you stated. The amount of money that Vegas has poured into their AHL system, despite the fact that they trade most of their good prospects away, is still impressive. They built a brand new facility just down the road. They've, according to reports, are paying a lot of their AHL people more than league average, which, I mean, that's great, but definitely could have gotten away with less. So to see the Vegas ownership and leadership group not decide to cheap out on an AHL team, I think is good. Not to mention too, there are a lot of nice perks to a brand new building, an ownership group that gives you money. And not to mention, you still get to live in Vegas. Take the strip and the glitz and glam and shopping and casinos away. It's actually a pretty good place to live from what I've heard. So I'm definitely starting that. I think that is definitely the most attractive option. I am going to bench Toronto, which was a close to being started for me. I understand Sarah's concerns, Steve Simmons hot dogs and all. But at the same point, I feel like the Marlies can definitely fly under the radar, especially as the Leafs are more front and center. Back when the Leafs were terrible in rebuilding, the Marlies took a lot more of the news coverage because that was where the future was. Whereas right now, the Leafs are running a 5 to 7 ring circus, depending on how you count. And the Marlies very much seem like they're flying under the radar. Even after the Leafs got eliminated, you didn't see this big media contingent parachute into the Marlies. They were whatever. So I feel like you're going to have access to a lot of the resources that Toronto can provide to you. And yes, you still have pressure to perform and do your job a little bit more than other places because it's still Toronto. But at the same point, I feel like you don't have to go through the Toronto media scrutiny while still getting most of the perks of working for the NHL's richest team, as well as, not to mention, it's, I think, a better line on your resume that you coached the Marlies to a successful run than it is to, a random other AHL team. That leaves me to ship Colorado. I will say in terms of resources, the Bud Light Event Center doesn't really do it for me. They're an independent team, and their owner has shown penchant in the past for being a cheapskate. Cough, Kelly Cup, cough. So I think that that docks it for me as well. The Avs also, too, don't have a lot of really exciting prospects that are kind of coming through their time. Whereas I think Vegas with Brennan Brisson and Isaiah Seville is interesting. Daniil Chaika as well. The Marlies have interesting prospects still somehow, even though it feels like they traded a bunch of picks. Like, there's still a chance that you see some Matthew Knies or Nick Robertson. They still have interesting guys in Pontus Holmberg, Mac Hollowell, Joseph Woll. Whereas, like, Colorado seems like, I mean, who's a prospect in Colorado that, like, you're really excited to see what they can do? Like, Eustace and Noonan really hasn't made that leap yet, although I think he's capable. And then it's like, no, I got nothing.
Yeah,
Shane Bowers left. Sampo Ranta left.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Kaut left. The defenseman that Kevin Lacey hates. From San Jose. Merkley.
Oh, yeah.
Nick
that
Merkley.
guy. Yeah.
That's something. Are you excited to go coach that guy, though? Not too many people are. So, yeah, I'm shipping the Colorado back to the ECHL, where they'll probably win another Kelly Cup and then not return it. That joke never gets old. I will never stop, especially now that CC isn't on the show. All right, moving on. New head coach most likely to succeed. I will take this one first since I kicked it to you, Sarah. I'm saying Matt McIlvaine. Oh, sorry. For those listening at home, the options are Brett McLean in Iowa, Matt McIlvaine in San Diego, and David Bell in Belleville. We talked about them at the beginning of the show because we actually finally got to do some leak news. I am starting Matt McIlvaine. I think he is put in the best place. Anaheim has prospects as they are rebuilding, so there will be definitely an influx of talent into his front door. B, San Diego has never had trouble attracting AHL free agents because, well, you get to live in San Diego. It's nice there, like always. I think he's too going to be a coach that is able to turn around things in a big way from the disasters of Roy Sommer and Joël Bouchard pretty quickly. I don't know if he makes them better than what Tucson or Bakersfield were down the run here, where they're like, they were a playoff team, but nobody really believed that they were that good. But I feel like he should at least be able to get that franchise back to a place that's respectable. Not to mention, too, like, that fan base is massive and incredibly dedicated. Like, that team was terrible last year, and they were still not filling the stadium, but getting respectable crowds for a team that couldn't get out of its own way. I'm going to bench Brett McLean in Iowa. I think he's going to have the tools to succeed, but I feel like Brett McLean is going to not necessarily have all of the roster pieces that he would like. The Wild are still kind of in cap crunch territory and are going to need guys on ELCs to make an impact. And they're not going to be making that impact in Iowa. They're going to be making it in Minnesota. We saw that with Connor Dewar getting called up. So I feel like that's going to be a struggle for him. But I still think that Iowa will at least be competitive. David Bell in Belleville, I don't believe in that roster that they currently have. I don't think they're going to attract many free agents. They don't have a fan base by and large. It's like they don't have Belleville fans, whereas like San Diego has people who just watch the Gulls. They don't care about the Ducks. Iowa has people who just watch the Wild. They don't care about Minnesota. Does Belleville have anyone that is just a big Belleville fan and doesn't really care about Ottawa? Like, I know they're closer together, but at the same point, you don't get that from that market. And I don't feel like he's going to be given the resources or roster pieces to really make competitive pushes. So it's nothing on him, just how I see it. Sarah, what say you?
We are in agreement here. I would be starting Matt McIlvaine. I think that, like you said, he's going to have a roster with players on it who can actually make a difference. The Gulls weren't bad last year due to lack of talent. there were other reasons for the Gulls not being good. I think that the Ducks know where they're at in terms of the rebuild and what the state of the franchise is, and I don't think that they're going to be afraid to put resources into San Diego to help that team not do what it did this past season. So I think that he's going to have the horses to make that cart go, or whatever the metaphor is. We're going to bench Brett McLean. Same reason. I think that he is going to have a good chance. I don't know that he's going to have the roster that he's going to want to be able to actually build something there. And I don't know that he's going to be given the players to make that happen. Iowa has been, a very specific type of team for so many years, that sort of physical, grinded out kind of team. And if he wants to remake that team in a different image, great. But that's not what this team looks like right now. So I think that he'll get close, but I don't know how well things will go in Iowa. I'm shipping David Bell. No fault of his own. I don't think that it's going to have anything to do with him as a head coach. When Belleville does poorly, I don't know that it should reflect too much on him. It should reflect more on the fact that who can name more than 2 Belleville Senators? I mean, we don't count.
Yeah. That's fair.
That's all.
Whoever got Troy Man's scouting report, they could probably name more than one.
I hope so.
All right. Last but not least here. Best playoff branding. So we have the last 3 teams remaining here, as that seemed the most appropriate for playoff branding. That is Hershey and their Roaring for More playoff brand, Coachella Valley and their Fired Up playoff branding, or Milwaukee and their Full Strength playoff branding. Sarah, I will let you go first. How do you see this?
They're all kind of aggressively mediocre. We're going to start Hershey. I'm always here for an animal pun. Roaring for More just sort of makes me laugh, even though it's in the rural juror world of I can't say it correctly. But I like it. It seems fun. We're going to bench Coachella Valley's Fired Up. It feels simple. Fired Up is very low-hanging fruit, I feel, for a team called the Firebirds. I feel like there was probably something more creative they could have done. We're shipping whatever the heck Milwaukee did. I feel like your team is called the Admirals. There is a wealth of naval-related puns or something that you probably could have come up with better than Full Strength or whatever. That doesn't excite me. So we're shipping that one.
So I think I'm going to take a bit of a different approach here. I'm also going to think about part of my rankings are going to be how good that matches with a team is just a general good branding slogan. But some of it's also going to be how well they've done using that branding to, brand stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to start Hershey, but it's real close. I'm starting Hershey because I think the Roaring for More is a good hashtag. It incorporates their whole Mike Vecchione doing the roar and the roar celebration and that kind of whole team in the locker room dynamic with a good branding hashtag. But I'm going to dock them points here because they don't actually use the hashtag Roaring for More a ton. Coachella Valley, their stupid Fired Up hashtag is on a lot of their images. It's something they use in their tweets. Whereas Hershey kind of does that, but on their lineup graphics or, goal gifs, it should be on those, and it's not. And I think that's a goof up by their front office. They have a good marketing slogan here, and they need to be pressing that more, I think. I am going to bench Milwaukee here. I think the Full Strength one, I agree, is not great, but they use it well. It's on all of their social media tweets, on everything. It's not in a lot of their graphics, which I don't like. I think that's one thing Coachella Valley has done right, that hashtag Fired Up is in everything. But Full Strength, I think, is supposed to kind of refer to they got all of those, 7 players from Nashville and are now finally at full strength. I feel like that would have been better as the sales are full or full crew or something like that. But the fact that they at least, I feel like they branded it everywhere is on all their social media posts. I feel like gets them over the line onto the bench and not into the coast. I'm shipping Coachella Valley here. Fired Up is. I think it's funny because I think they originally started with Rally the Valley and then realized that Lehigh Valley also was using that. Not positive. I did not dig far enough back, but I'm 60% sure that that's correct. The Fired Up is, sure, fire, you're the Firebirds, but it very much felt like a recycled one that could have been any fire-based team. I feel like they could have done a better job of Light the Desert or something like that. I do appreciate they did at least a good job of getting that hashtag on a lot of their graphics, but it's not used a lot in their tweets, their social media. It gets some use as hashtag Fired Up, but the fact that it's on their graphics, I think at least counts for something. But yeah, very tired, fired up. No, I'm not feeling that. So that's how I see it. All right, Sarah, any closing thoughts here on the Calder Cup finals, on the episodes, thoughts in general?
Hashtag Fired Up is probably not particularly unique either. I was just thinking about that. If you load it up, you find a lot of things. Obviously the algorithm knows that I'm looking for hockey things, and therefore it's going to feed me hockey things. But Fired Up is not someone can go plug that into Twitter and it hit or miss if they're going to actually get Firebird stuff.
Yeah, that's another good one too. All right then. I will say I'm looking forward to being in the building for Game 4. I'm hoping that I get to see the atmosphere that we haven't really seen on AHL TV in Hershey. I'm excited too. I have not been to a Calder Cup Finals game in 20-something years. It's been a really long time, and it was in Hershey too the last time. So this will be fun. I'm looking forward to it. If you want to come yell at me or say hi and talk, that's fine. I will be rocking the Calder Farmstead sweatshirt. I'll walk around a bunch during intermissions and breaks and stuff like that. So if you see me, come say hi. Otherwise, Sarah, take us home.
That is it for the show. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. The Calder Farmstead is a part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and several other great hockey, sports, and sports entertainment programs, all at www.fullpresscoverage.com. Just click the podcast's drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website and enjoy.
And if you are enjoying the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube, like the video and comment what you thought of the episode. Doing so helps others find the show, and your reviews help us improve it. You can also follow the show on social media at Calder Farmstead, on Twitter, at The Calder Farmstead, on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more can be found in our Linktree page. Also, you can find where to buy this cool sweatshirt in our Linktree page at linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's AD_DYSFUNCTION. So we can make music for you too. Sarah, where can the people find you?
So my name is Sarah Avampato. You can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at Right Said Sarah. That's WRITE, said Sarah with an H. You can check out my writing at Full Press Hockey, where I talk about the Ontario Reign, or at Canes Country, where I talk about the Chicago Wolves. Sean, where can people find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien. You can find me at Twitter you can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SeanObrien81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien_81. You can find my stats work on Tableau at bit.ly/data-dump-and-chase. That's where all the graphs, the money puck thing, that game predictor, that and lots more. Bit.ly/data-dump-and-chase, all lowercase, all one word. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. As we always talk about, it is a labor of love. It is currently 1:14 in the morning. So as we could say, we work tirelessly to hopefully make a good show and a good preview and do good analysis. But that is it for Sarah Avampado. I am Sean O'Brien. Please dump and chase responsibly.